I just finished watching season 5 of Better Call Saul, and guys, man, this show just keeps getting better. That's something that I love about Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And I believe it's just Vince Gilligan that writes it. If there's a team there, whoever is writing this series, it is so hard to just nail season after season. It is so hard to have your story continue to get better as the seasons go on. And that's what Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad have done so well. And Better Call Saul, I have been liking each season significantly more than the last. And that's saying something because I really enjoyed it, especially from the beginning. We're going to talk about Better Call Saul today, guys. We're going to talk about season 5 of Better Call Saul. This is going to be a spoiler review. I'm going to go through the story, touch on different things. I'm going to go through it. Like, I have some bullet points on my screen right in front of me here of like the general things that were going on in each episode. I'll touch on what I want to. I'll go through it in complete order, and I'm going to talk about Better Call Saul. I'm just going to gush why I like the show, talk about the story that I liked. Thank you so much for being here, guys. We're going to get into the video in just a second, and you have time to click off if you happen to not see this yet and don't want spoilers, guys. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's talk about Better Call Saul Season 5. So, one more thing I do want to say, though, is please keep in the comment sections just talking about Season 5 because I'm so excited for Season 6, and I do not want it spoiled. I read my comments, and I really appreciate anybody giving their thoughts. So, let's talk about just Season 5 or anything before that. Okay? Anyway, so the season starts off with another flash forward of Gene in a taxi, and the driver knows him, so he's really worried now, and he ends up getting on the phone with the disappearing guy, and it was something that I liked about this season and something I liked about Better Call Saul is the way they introduce the characters, because it's like, just like when they introduced Lydia, it's just like so nonchalant. It's just, oh, there's Lydia, and now he just calls and like, oh, there's the vacuum guy. He's like, hey, I need a model or I need a rework or whatever he said there, right? But then he changed his mind. So I have no idea what's going on with Gene. I never knew what was going on with Gene. I didn't know what was happening to Saul in the future. I'm just left confused by the whole thing. You know what I mean? So, but okay, let's continue getting into the story though. So into the present time, we are brought back to Lalo. And Lalo, I didn't think that Lalo would become such a prevalent storyline character. I didn't know what to think about him. I like, he came in, I thought he was just going to be like another Tuco type thing. He was going to come, he's going to go. But man, Lalo ended up being like a fantastic character. Like, don't get me wrong, he's a piece of crap, right? But the actor, and this is what the Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad franchise is so good at doing. Their actors are just top notch. Lalo and the guy who plays Lalo is perfect. The character is like this, like really horrible person who's ruthless, has no problem like skinning people alive, right? But then he'll come in and he'll be like, "I'll buddy with you." The smile that he puts on is perfect. You know, he's just like really good at being scary but positive at the same time. And the actor displays that perfectly. Like, I really like Lalo as like a character in a movie. It's so good. But anyways, so the series kind of starts off, the season starts off with Lalo being suspicious of Gus. And Gus ends up lying to him, but Lalo buys it. But he's a little bit skeptical, so he wants to start looking into what Gus is going on because we know that he's building something. Gus has something going on, right? They don't trust him. There's still that whole gang war, right? But honestly, not a lot happened in the first episode besides that, really. And at the end of the episode, Kim ends up, and I thought this was just important to mention because it's part of Saul and Kim's relationship. So Kim is trying to get one of her clients to take a deal, and Saul ends up like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to just stage this. We're going to talk about this. We're going to make him want to take the deal. And Kim's like, no, I don't want to lie to my clients. I don't want to scheme this around. She gets mad at Saul, but then ends up doing it herself. And this is where I'm so confused, man. I'm so confused about Kim. Okay, like, I'm just completely lost because she likes doing all this stuff, and then she's like, no, I'm not like that. You know what I mean? I think it's just maybe female nature, man, to be honest with you. Like, hey, I'm not supposed to be doing this. This is exciting, so who knows? But anyways, after that, Gus ends up putting Nacho to get Lalo's trust. And Nacho's obviously skeptical, but they're still threatening his father. No matter what, he's like, this dude doesn't trust me. But Gus is like, figure it out or we're going to kill your father, right? So Nacho ends up trying to get Lalo's trust throughout the entire season. And the way that he does that, and well, he doesn't really do that. And it's, okay, while I'm making this video, I'm a couple episodes into season 6. So forgive me if what I'm about to say comes from season 6, which I don't think it does. But regardless, Nacho ends up stealing a drug from a place where the police are going in. He ends up getting it back, and he's like, okay, perfect. This will make me get a little bit closer to Lalo. I'll do anything for Lalo. I'm one of his guys, right? And I initially was like, okay, he's probably going to get Lalo's affection, or he's probably going to get his trust, his respect, whatever he's looking for. But then we find out in a little while down the road, and I don't mean to go off topic a little bit, that Lalo has no faith in a guy like Nacho. So I was like looking at this when it was happening. I was like, I don't know. Does Lalo like Nacho? I'm not too sure if he's just like, you need to do way more than that to get in the club. I don't know how any of that works. But anyways, after that, we move on to Mike. Mike is very, very upset about Werner's death, especially being the one to kill him, right? He liked Werner, and he was just in a really, really bad mood, as anybody would be. So he ends up babysitting Kaylee, and with Mike already being upset about Werner's death, and Kaylee asking about her father and Mike's son, right? Mike just randomly lashes out, which, to be honest with you, made me pretty mad because that's no reason to treat Kaylee, who's asking about her father, and then he just freaks out on her, leaves. The mom comes in, or Stacy, she comes in, and then Mike's like, oh my god, like, she's been in her room and she won't come out, and Mike just like threw a little hissy fit. Like, I don't care what you're going through. I don't care who you killed. I don't care that your son's dead. You don't treat a little girl like that. So Mike was absolutely 100% the wrong in that situation. To be honest with you, I didn't feel bad for him. I just felt bad for the daughter, or for Stacy's daughter in that sense. But moving on, we have another little bit of confusion on my end, because we are taken back to Kim and Saul's relationship. They're at home, and Kim's freaking out about like not wanting to cheat her clients, but she just did it herself. So I have no idea what to think about that. But moving on to continuing Jimmy's story, Jimmy ends up getting way more business as Saul, and he ends up being stuck with that lady in the elevator, which is a really, really fun situation. It's kind of like, it kind of makes me wonder how many people do the type of stuff that Jimmy does, like, on a regular basis, because it's like, oh, I need to talk to this girl. She won't talk to me. How are we going to do it? We're going to get trapped in an elevator. And it's like, oh, well, what can you do? That wasn't really important to the story, but I found that entire situation pretty funny, where Saul's like, well, now that we're here, like, I enjoyed that. There's a lot from Saul in this entire series that really, really cracked me up. But after that, okay, so we're getting into something that I was really excited to see, but we have something we need to touch on first. So Nacho ends up picking Jimmy up and bringing him to Lalo, and this is where they are introduced, and now what they need one of their guys to be freed from prison without talking, and Saul's the man for the job, and now Saul wants to be a friend of the cartel. Well, Saul doesn't want to be. He's being dragged into it and essentially forced. And again, it's where I was sitting back, and like, Lalo's such a good character, because he's just like, oh yeah, I need this from you. You'll do it, like, and then he's like so cool about it. And it's like, he's trying to be buddy with you, but at the same time, this dude's gonna like absolutely torture you and everybody that you love at the same time, right? And I don't even know, like, it's crazy, like, to me, how good this character is and how much I ended up liking him in the show, I don't actually like him. I mean, like, I enjoy the writing for him. Does that make sense? Like, the character is obviously a little bit of a scumbag, a little bit, but you get the point. But anyways, guys, this is where I legitimately had a big smile on my face. So typically, I don't know about you guys, when I'm watching stuff, I have a straight face through it. Like, the most you'll get from me is really like, But like, I'm watching this by myself, and I actually cracked like the biggest, fattest smile. Hank Schrader and Steve Gomez are back. The camera was all blurred. They're coming in, and I'm like, dude, that's Hank. That is a Hank, man. Hank and Steve were back, and I love these two. They're still bickering. This is before Breaking Bad, right? So Hank is not humbled yet. Hank's like walking around like he's the best thing. Hank's insulting people. He's rude. They're funny together, and it's really, really interesting to see, because if you were to watch this Better Call Saul before Breaking Bad, you would still think of Hank as like kind of like a D-head, you know what I mean? But now I'm looking at it from perspective where I really like Hank, But this is before he's humbled, and when Hank is introduced in season 1 of Breaking Bad, you still really don't like the guy. The guy's he's not a nice guy, right? So it's very strange to see, because it has completely turned me around on Hank. Because after Breaking Bad, of course, Hank became a fan favorite, and still now, instead of looking at him and I'm going, oh man, this guy, now I'm looking at him and I'm laughing, which is very, very interesting to me. So Hank and Saul talk for the first time. Hank and Steve take Saul in a room, and Saul convinces them to get real information in order to let their guy go, right? So they all fake everything, and it took a little bit of talking and Hank being himself, and it ended up all working out. So they have a mole in the DEA, I guess, right? But in the meantime, Nacho he goes to his father and he sets up a whole thing where, or excuse me, Nacho's father comes to Nacho and he's suspicious that somebody wants to buy his business. He wants to retire and he knows that Nacho put it up to it. But Nacho just wants him to be safe because Nacho's father doesn't know that Nacho is not in control of him having a gun to his head right now, right? So he just wants what's best for the father. And another thing I'm confused about. So I'm really confused with like Kim and Saul's relationship. And I'm also really confused about Nacho because, again, I don't know if this was just something that I missed or if he was always just a part of it or if it wasn't explained or whatever. I'm confused if Nacho was dragged into this or not because it's so evident, right? That Nacho wants out. Nacho doesn't want to be part of this, but he can't. This is something that you can't leave. Nacho doesn't like doing a lot of stuff and like he cares about some innocent people. This is something that we notice later on in the season. Nacho becomes more and more likable. So my like meter for Nacho is very confused right now because if he's just gone to the cartel and is just hurting people and getting to this business and getting into all of this stuff like in his own free will, he's a bad person. I don't care what happens to him and I will not be cheering for him. But if he's not, if he's forced into it, Nacho is a very likable character. He's fair. He does bad things to bad people, right? So I'm really conflicted on how I feel about Nacho, to be honest with you. So long story short with that entire situation, Nacho's dad was like, no, you go to the police. That's the only thing you could do. But he's being very naive because obviously you can't go to the police, right? Or his dad's dead or Nacho, something worse is going to happen to him, right? So anyways, after that, we're then introduced to the man who's in the way of the Mesa Verde call center because he won't leave his home. And honestly, this it wasn't really that important to the story, but it made for some really interesting conversation. Like Kevin was trying to get him to budge and Kim had to talk to him. And like, it was just a whole fun situation where he's freaking out on him and everybody's moved and they're looking to dig his place and he's just like, reminded me of the guy from Up, to be honest with you. So Kim ends up freaking out on him, but then moving on to Jimmy's life, Howard comes back and Howard actually offers Jimmy a job and Jimmy kind of shrugs it off, which is confusing to me because why wouldn't he just say no or freak out like he does later on, right? And Jimmy's just like, oh yeah, thanks Howard, I'll think about it. Like there's a few things in the series that just really didn't make too much sense to me. But so Jimmy ends up then going to his house in the next episode and throwing bowling balls on his car. And they spent so much time with the bowling balls of like what's going on with the bowling balls. And then just bang, it's on Howard's car, right? So after that, moving back to the man or the Up guy, Mr. Fredrickson, right? Saul ends up taking him on as a client. And that I already knew, like, oh boy, that's going to be something interesting, right? Saul's going to come up with a bunch of stuff of why they can't move his house. And boy, do we get into that. But before that, Mike ends up being mad at Stacy because she doesn't feel comfortable with Mike staying there, which, to be honest with you, I see both sides of it. I see both sides of that entire situation where, like, you obviously don't want somebody lashing out at your daughter, somebody who's supposed to be watching him, especially if it was for, like, a nonsensical reason, right? But at the same time, it's Mike, it's his grandfather, and you know that Mike would never actually hurt her. So I understand both of them, but anyways, Mike gets pissed off, he takes off, and he gets angry, he ends up getting mugged, putting up a fight, and then, like, kind of egging the people on, and he gets really, really beat up, but that episode ends up ending with Mike waking up somewhere in Mexico. Somebody saved him. We can only assume that, of course, it was the cartel, right? So it ends up in the next episode being revealed that, of course, it was Gus's men. So Gus actually shows up to Mike's location and reveals why he helped him. And to what Gus said was that Mike understands revenge, right? But Mike doesn't like the idea because he doesn't want to just go in, because Mike's not like inherently a bad guy. Mike doesn't want to just go and kill for some gang war, right? He had no problem taking on like Hector Salamanca because Hector is a bad guy. And of course, there's a revenge aspect to all of that, right? So their relation, I believe that was the beginning of kind of like Gus and Mike's like really, really intertwined relationship. Although they've been like pretty back and forth with each other now. It's very interesting to see these relationships develop, especially before Breaking Bad, right? So after that, we have this beautiful and hilarious scenario of events where Saul's just constantly, as expected, putting up barriers for why Kevin and Mesa Verde can't dig up the house or can't get Mr. Fredrickson out of his house. And it's important to note Mr. Fredrickson is just the Up guy. I understand that's not his name, right? But there's not too much to say about that, but it was really, really funny, just like the ridiculous lengths that Saul would go, right? I love watching Saul come up with those types of schemes, right? So then after that, Kim ends up offering to get herself excused from this, but Kevin doesn't want to budge. Kevin wants to keep going with this to this whole thing here. So we then move on to the point where they go to the nail salon, Jimmy and Kim, and they end up hiring that guy to break into Kevin's house and look for something. But then, so they find absolutely nothing useful until Kim ends up finding a photo on her own that realized it was kind of like a ripoff of a logo in so many words, right? So Kim actually ends up telling Jimmy that after all of that, of course, is just Kim being herself again. She doesn't want to blackmail Kevin. She wants to reach a settlement. And Jimmy agrees to this, but then they have that meeting where they all sit down and it's not going well. Jimmy sits down. He's like, I want $4 million. I can't remember if it was 4 million, 7 million, something like that. It was a ridiculous number. And then they laugh at it. But then Jimmy, against Kim's wishes, pulls out the video anyways. And I understand Jimmy's perspective. It needed to be a shock. They needed to actually be upset at each other, right? For it to really work and for them to buy it. And I absolutely love those videos. I absolutely love it. Like, he takes Kevin's father and just like smears it up. Like, it's crazy to me, but I really, really enjoyed that whole thing, right? So after, like I said, Kim didn't want to blackmail Kevin. Saul went behind her back and did it anyways. And Kim ends up at home freaking out on Saul because she feels like a sucker to his schemes. And then randomly, she has to get married, which was confusing at the time. But that makes sense because then they can't start testifying against each other, which, to be honest with you, I didn't really know about. But I don't know if that's like everywhere in the world or if it's just Albuquerque. I have no idea. Anyways, that's how it works in Better Call Saul, right? So after that, we move back on to Mike and Gus, and Mike ends up secretly pointing the police to a murder that Lalo did. And why he did that while Lalo was trying to get Gus's dealers caught. So Gus is like clearly a step ahead here, but Lalo is really, really digging in deep. But the police find out that he murdered somebody. After that, Jimmy, Huel, and Kim end up getting married all together. One big happy ending. And Huel has a little bit of a heart-to-heart with Saul, which is nice. But it is an awkward marriage, but there's nothing you can do. I'm still really confused on their entire relationship. But after that, Lalo is actually charged with murder. And he ends up meeting up with Saul again. And he orders him to get him out on bail. Saul's like, you just murdered somebody. The police know you've murdered somebody. This is ridiculous. There's no way that's going to happen. He's just like, you'll do it. You'll do it, right? And you could just feel the tension there. You could just feel it like Saul needs to do it, right? We are then brought into a scene where Kevin kind of freaks out on Rich and Kim and might end up firing them. He's like, I'll let you know and like whatever, and if you want to continue moving forward. But then Kim comes back and is like, hey, you ignored all of our advice, which is actually kind of true, to be honest with you. Kim's actually like really, really good at what she does. So they end up working for Mesa Verde still, which, to be honest with you, isn't really, really important. But then we move on to a very, very nice scene where Mike ends up hanging out with Stacy, and he's all happy, man. He's really, really nice and happy. And he tells Stacy that he's better. And they end up bonding over Mike's son, which is very nice because we haven't seen this yet. Mike has been talking about his son. Mike has been laughing about his son, and Mike even brought that up. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like, oh, Maddie used to love doing that, right? And Stacy ended up smiling. They ended up bonding a little bit over a lost husband and a lost son, which was very, very nice to see from Mike. And something that he said that I think is very important in like real life outside of movies is he's like, I decided to play the cards I was dealt, which is very nice because if you had a wonderful son, why would you just like not want to ever talk about him, right? Like if my son, like I'm having a daughter later on in the year. So if she's born and she ends up dying, like I would love to talk about the great moments that I've had with her. I would never want to erase her from my existence. So I don't really understand what was going on in that entire sentence with Mike, to be honest with you. But we move on to back with the cartel. Lalo ends up wanting to burn down Los Polos, and Gus and Nacho end up doing it, and Gus doesn't really like it, but there's nothing you can do. They want to keep Nacho as the mole, and Gus and Nacho ended up doing it themselves. So there wasn't too much else to talk about when it comes to Los Polos burning. It's just like Nacho is again kind of solidifying himself as a mole. But moving back into Saul and Lalo, Saul says the police have fabricated evidence and Lalo's bail was just set to $7 million, right? Which was absolutely nuts. So they were like, oh, okay, well, okay, Saul, bang, $7 million. But then in that same sequence of events, right, Jimmy ends up running into Howard again, and Howard's like, hey, Jimmy, have you thought about taking the job? And this is where Jimmy finally snaps. And on top of that, he blames Howard for Chuck's death. Like, whoo, boy. Oh, man, that must have hit Howard hard because especially Howard still thinks that he is responsible for Chuck's death. And Jimmy freaks out on Howard. He's like, it was really nice to see. It was kind of well-deserving for Howard, and I thought something bad was going to happen from it. I thought Jimmy was going to punch him or something, and then his law license would be in trouble again. But anyways, Jimmy ends up after that freak out, meeting again with Lalo, and Lalo puts Jimmy to go get all of the money, right? And Saul ends up saying, $100,000, and Lalo, being the chill guy that he is like, I can do that. Yeah, go get my money. And it's almost like there's no issue with it at all. But of course, like, you can't say no to Lalo, right? So Jimmy, he's really, really doesn't want to do it. Ends up saying yes to $100,000 because Jimmy does want the money. He tells Kim. Kim is very, very hesitant, understandably so. And Jimmy ends up assuring that everything will be fine. Jimmy ends up going to go get the money and is obviously ambushed. And I find it funny that he was like, and here's the thing. I wonder if this is how it works in real life, where you go and meet up like with a drug deal, right? He meets up with the cousins and he's like talking. He's like, hey guys, I'm like, because he's new to it. It's like, hey, I'm just going to go bring this back to Lalo. I wonder if it works like this in real life, where they walk up, they just hand absolutely no speaking. It's just like, here you go. And there's trust that the money's in there. Everything works out perfectly fine. So like I said, Saul ends up getting ambushed and Mike ends up saving the day. Then we have that entire situation in the desert, which was crazy. It was pretty much just them suffering, Saul drinking his pee, and like they end up pushing his car over. Like, I'm trying to think about all the important details when it comes to that, but a lot of it was just them suffering. And something that really stuck out to me was he told Kim, and Mike said she's in the game now. And this is where I was thinking, because obviously Kim, and this is something that I've been looking forward like for the entire series, right? Obviously Kim is not in Breaking Bad. I think, knowing Breaking Bad, Kim is not going to have a fairy tale ending. They're not just going to divorce. Kim's not going to go on her way. I think Lalo's going to kill Kim. Now I think that, but I was thinking like the entire time that something bad's going to happen to Kim. She's going to die somehow, whether it's in a car crash. I don't know. Like, the first time I saw her get into a car crash, I was like, oh my God, is this where Kim dies? So I've been waiting for Kim to die this entire time, and I think Lalo's actually going to be the guy to do it. And again, please don't spoil that for me, but so Mike says that she's in the game now, which was nuts. And Saul's like, no, she's not in the game. She's not in the game. Kim is not in the game. But of course, she is in the game, right? But so Kim actually ends up talking to Lalo for some reason. Like, I understand she's worried about Jimmy, but she ends up putting herself in the game, which is nuts. And I don't understand, like, for someone as smart as Kim, why she could do that. I guess it's for storyline development. But at the same time, like, Kim, come on, what are you doing, dude? Like, why would you go and talk to a guy like Lalo, especially if you know what it is, right? But anyways, Saul and Mike end up having this whole, they find the final car who ended up getting away from the ones that ambushed him. They tried to stop him and take the car and rob him and get it away, but they ended up destroying the car, right? They keep walking. Mike convinces Saul to keep going because the people that loves him, he's going to keep going to his very last breath until he makes sure that Kaylee is taken care of, which is very nice because you have Mike and you understand why he does what he does, right? He just wants to have Stacy and Kaylee be well off for their entire life. So Saul kind of takes that, thinks about Kim. He keeps going. They end up getting cell service, calls Kim. Kim starts bawling her eyes out because Saul is actually safe. They end up going to a gas station. They get picked up by Victor and everything seems to be okay, but of course it's far from okay. When they get back, Saul ends up delivering all of the money who the police are suspicious about, but he's just like, hey, I'm not going to ask my client where he gets his money. That's not my job, right? Lalo ends up getting set free, and Jimmy tells him that his car broke down, which I don't know if Lalo ended up believing him or not. Regardless, he ends up, of course, finding the car. But he accepts the answer, and he continues moving on. So Jimmy then goes home and actually lies to Kim. And something that I forgot to mention is once they got married, there was this whole thing where Kim's like, if you have an urge not to tell me something, we're married now. No lies, no problem, right? And this is why Kim was actually really happy with him the first time that he actually opened up about going to the border and picking up money for Lalo, right? She was happy that he told him the truth, but now Saul decided not to tell the truth because I don't know if he was just lying or if he had PTSD. Well, obviously he had PTSD, or if it was a combination of both. I don't know the reason why Saul didn't open up to Kim, but he just said, like, the car broke down, everything's okay. But then Kim ended up finding a bullet hole in the mug that she bought him. And I didn't know what to think about that. I thought they're like, okay, now my brain was going to, is the relationship going to be over after this? Because Saul just broke the marriage promise now, right? Because I'm looking for a way, like, how does Kim get out of this story? Now I'm back on team Kim's dying, but it's something that I keep waiting for the entire time, right? So Kim actually ends up being okay with it, and Kim, being the W wife that she is, just takes care of Saul. She doesn't hold it against him or anything like that. I thought that she might, but she's not. And it shows further in the next scene how she is a very good person, because she ends up quitting Mesa Verde because she wants to do a job that feels good in the heart. She wants to do a job where it actually helps people, has an impact. But while Kim's doing that, she goes home, breaks the news, but Jimmy has way too much PTSD and he's really, really dealing with it. We have a whole kind of few scenarios where Saul's depressed. Kim's trying to help him. It just doesn't make it feel better. Saul's listening to like the body's crushing and all that type of stuff, right? So he ends up talking to Mike about it, because Mike is really the only person that he can talk to about it. And he was actually very mean to Mike, and Mike gave him good advice. Like, he's like, I can't believe all this is happening, and you're the only one I can talk to about this. You're the only guy that I can talk to about this. And Mike gave him just about like the best advice that you could possibly give. He's like, choices put us down on a road. There's nothing you can do. You're on the road. You can steer. While you're on the road, you can choose your future, but you can't change what happened. There's nothing you can do. And Saul, with PTSD, you're just going to one day wake up and you're going to realize, hey, I haven't thought about that in a while. And then you'll get it over it. It'll get better with time. So Mike like gave him the ideal advice for that. Accept what happened and continue moving forward. And Saul was just like, I can't believe I have to talk to you about this. And then Saul later on has the audacity to ask Mike for information about Lalo, right? So anyways, speaking of Lalo after that ends up discovering Jimmy's car and decides to stay in Albuquerque instead of going back to Mexico. Mike calls and he warns Saul that Lalo's about to arrive. He's like, put me on speakerphone. Bang, there we go. Saul puts the phone down. And that whole situation takes place. And wow, was that tense. And this is where I was sitting. I was like, Kim's going. Kim's a goner, man. Lalo knows Saul lied to him. So Lalo ends up knocking on the door. It's this really freaky moment because we know as the viewer that Lalo found Saul's car, but Saul doesn't know that. Saul's probably thinking like, oh, what does he want? And he's like, tell me the story. Tell me the story. Tell me the story. I paid $7 million for this story. I can hear the story all I want. And Saul keeps changing it just like a little bit or adding more details to it each time that he tells it, because Lalo obviously knows that he's lying now. And what was interesting to me is Mike had a sniper through the window. Did he not shoot him because of Gus's orders? Did he not shoot him because of the gang war? I don't know how that would necessarily affect everything, but Mike had his back again. Like, Mike is very, very awesome for that. But then Kim ends up saving the day. And he's like, don't you think it's possible that down there they just total his car? They shoot target practice. It's like, hey, we're in Albuquerque. People, you leave anything out and people will start open firing at you. Don't you think that's possible? And again, I'm unsure if Lalo bought that lie or if he's just like, you know what's an acceptable answer? I'm here just so you know I kind of know that you're lying type thing, right? So I don't know what Lalo was thinking in that moment, but regardless, he accepts the entire answer. And after Lalo leaves, Jimmy ends up telling Kim the truth about everything, and they end up hiding in a hotel. And what was very nice is Kim was being completely supportive the whole time. She didn't hold the lie against him or anything like that, which she would be totally in the right to do. I don't care if Saul has PTSD. It's your wife. You should open up to her about stuff like that. But then again, like, you don't have to go to the extent that you did, but like, no, like, okay, something bad happened in the desert. You didn't drink pee. Like, it's different when you can, like, I guess if from Saul's perspective, it's different if you could hide it. But Saul can't hide it. He came home beat up. He came home with PTSD. He's not being the man that he was, you know? So to be honest with you, I kind of understand both sides of that situation. But after that, so Lalo is still on the move, and he ends up taking Nacho, trusting him a little bit more. We find out he takes him to his home. Nacho, of course, still being Gus's mole, he gets a call telling him to open a back gate at 3 a.m. Before that, and I was like, okay, maybe Lalo's actually going to die here. I don't really know. I wasn't sure what to think there, but I know, like, okay, there's going to be an attack on Lalo. But before we see that, Howard ends up running into Kim and actually just decides to warn her about like what the type of person Jimmy is. He's like, don't you know Jimmy? Jimmy would always hurt you. Jimmy doesn't know what he wants. Jimmy's dangerous. He's always hurting people. Look at all the schemes that he's pulling. And Kim finds that funny. And again, I'm like, I don't understand Kim's relationship with Jimmy. I don't understand where her head's at because she laughs at the thought of it. It's like, oh, you know, Jimmy runs schemes, whatever. But it actually kind of is a big deal if you're looking to a partner. Jimmy's not necessarily the ideal partner you want to have in life. And Kim is like a very, well-respected, like intelligent person. But then again, like how intelligent is she if she's the one dating Jimmy, right? So to be honest with you, Howard was kind of right there, and he ended it with, you know who knew Jimmy? Chuck. Chuck knew Jimmy. And of course, we all know how Chuck viewed Jimmy, and Chuck wasn't necessarily wrong about that. The thing is, Jimmy is inherently a good person, right? That's where that whole bridge kind of crosses. But after that, Jimmy and Kim, they're just happy because Mike ended up saying that Lalo was going to be dead that night. They sleep together, and then they end up discussing the possibility of a scheme on Howard so Jimmy can get his settlement money, which is interesting. And it was funny, like, thinking about all the weird things that they can do to him. And I don't know if I mentioned this in my previous video, but I was spoiled by TikTok. I was watching like 3 minutes, like right before bed. I was watching just a little bit of TikTok, and bang, I find out, I get this scenario, and with the caption, it's like, no character had a worse ending, and it just showed Howard there. And I'm like, since then, that was a season or two ago. Since then, I was like, what happens to Howard? What happens to Howard? So I know that this has got to be what it is. They're going to screw him over somehow, right? They're going to make Howard look bad. I don't know what they're going to do, but they're going to ruin Howard's life somehow because Jimmy hates Howard. Kim is fresh pissed off at Howard, and they're talking about all the different things that they could do to him, right? So I'm like, okay, I kind of see the ending that I'm kind of picturing the ending there, which is a little bit unfortunate in my end, but still. So whatever they end up planning, I imagine will succeed flawlessly. But moving on to the end of the season, Nacho has his big day at the big boss's place, right? And there's nothing really came from it. They let him live, to be honest with you. But Nacho ends up letting those people in at 3 a.m. He ends up opening the gate, but then before that, he walks out at night to end up doing it. He's sneaking around. The guards trust him. Like, he finds Lalo sitting at a campfire where the gate is, which was like, I was like, oh my God. And then I started thinking like, okay, are they just going to attack anyways? Because Nacho's not in Breaking Bad. So I'm also waiting for Nacho to die. But part of me is like, what if he runs away from his father with his father? But then the other part of me knowing Breaking Bad is like, not everybody has a happy ending. So I don't know if Nacho's going to live or die throughout this. If one character is going to have a happy ending, I do believe it's going to be Nacho, but I'm not sold on that at all, to be honest with you. I don't know what to think. So I was sitting there, and we know those people are coming to attack Lalo, right? They're coming to his home, Gus's guys or whoever. Like I guess they were hired by Gus. Doesn't really matter. Gus's guys. I thought Nacho was going to get caught in those crossfires, but he ends up setting the house on fire. Lalo thinks it's smoke. He runs in. Nacho gets out of there, and he's like, hey, in the kitchen, go in the kitchen, right? And then they end up having that entire fight scene, which was pretty cool. Lalo ends up living, but then the season ends with Lalo living, but having that person before he dies tell the team that the job was done. It was tough, and it was done, and Lalo ends up taking off, and that's how the season ends. So now I'm sitting here, and I'm like, Kim's a goner. Kim is an absolute goner, dude. He's going to kill Kim, and I'm not ready for that, man. I'm not ready for that. I know Kim's story is going to end horribly, and I don't know what's going to happen to her, and I'm sad, man. I really like Kim. Regardless, guys, though, this whole season was absolutely fantastic. The character development, the actors, the writing, everything is absolutely brilliant. I cannot wait to watch season 6. To be honest with you, I can't wait to get this show over with because I'm staying up late because I can't stop watching hour-long episodes, and I go into work with like 2.5 hours of sleep. It's such a good show, man. It is so good. So, guys, let me know what you thought about season 5 of Better Call Saul, and I would really appreciate it if you made it this far. Remember, keep the comment section just about season 5 because I'm very excited to watch season 6. I would love to hear your thoughts on the season afterwards. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. On the screen right now, if you'd like to continue watching the Clenema channel, there'll be 2 videos on screen for you to check out. Plus, if you want to go check out other Better Call Saul episodes, I've done that, and 1 season of Breaking Bad. Go check them out, guys. I will see you either there or in the next video. Take care.